96.9 FM. Fresh news, smart talk, all day. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the position of the management and staff of Guardian Network.
Good morning, Bahamas. Good morning, good morning. It's Wednesday, March the 3rd, 2021, and you're on the clock with Erin Greene. On the clock, we engage organizations, institutions, social and cultural leaders, and ordinary people to better understand the impact of public policy, private sector development, and emerging social and consumer trends. On the clock, we have conversations that help us understand and navigate a rapidly changing Bahamas. Now, I know you tuned into Guardian Radio 96.9 FM, but you can also join us on GuardianTalkRadio.com, or you can listen on TV on Cable Bahamas Channel 969 or Flow Channel 612. Or you can download the Guardian Radio app, your Apple or Android smart devices, and listen to our audio feed or watch us on our video feed right there on the Guardian Radio app. You can text us at Guardian Radio text line 422-4796. That's 422-4796. And you can call us at 323-623-325-4316 or 326-4259. That's 323-6232, 325-4316 or 326-4259. It's great to be here with you this morning. Before I start the show, I want to mention three things. First of all, water and sewerage. There have been a number of leaks occurring across the foreshore, the northern foreshore, over the last couple of days. I again want to encourage you guys to do some research on whether seismic or earthquake activity in the region may be affecting your infrastructure. Also, I would like to ask you to please put notices in the paper and on the radio for major road closures, like the detour that I've experienced over the last couple of days on Bay Street by the old bridge. I would have loved a heads up, right? Or a detour sign a little further back on Bay Street, reminding me that if I want to avoid that detour, that I should maybe travel south and avoid Bay Street and Shirley Street. These things are helpful. Also, I want to point out a story I saw in the paper, I think it was yesterday, about the BPC case where I think it's the Kill the Drill team, along with water keepers, I think, have petitioned for a review of the proceedings surrounding the contract to drill. This is the most important part. They were asked to pay a sort of like a bond, or I guess like a retainer or something. They were asked to pay $200,000 like as security in case, I guess, they lose and they got to pay costs, right? And the only thing I could think about was, have we clearly and fully determined and then told the Bahamian people whether BPC has paid all of its fees to the government yet, including their licensing fees? It's one thing that they were able to drill without certainty that all their fees were paid, but to ask this group of Bahamians that simply wanted a review of what's happening or what has happened to pay a $200,000 like bond to secure, the money in case they lose the case, that seems problematic. That we have to pay so much money to participate in governance, right? And I think it's a similar thing with the appeal court. I could be wrong. Please, feel free to correct me. In fact, I appreciate that. But it may cost up to $50,000 to take a case forward. These sorts of things are barriers to participation in governance and barriers to participation in development. We need to focus on it. And really, maybe what we need is a private sector organization, like a civil society organization that focuses on policy, on legislation, on rules, and these sort of things to let the Bahamian people know what the issues are, what the details are involved with the issue, like the law, the policy, the social dynamic, the economics involved, and help Bahamians, right, form more informed opinions about issues that impact and affect them, so that when they do engage their legislators, right, they can have more informed, like substantive, real solid conversations with their legislators about what it is they want, what they expect, and what they know is required to achieve those things. Anyway, that was just my little update this morning. I had to drive myself to the station, and so I didn't have the opportunity to pay attention in the same way that I do to all the traffic infractions that occur around me, right? Like I had to, as a driver, pay attention to 360, right? Everything that was going on around me, but I didn't really get the time to pay attention like I like to. So all y'all road users who like to drive with your phone in your hand and put on makeup while you're driving, I give you a blight this morning. I give you a break. Because we talking women in leadership, and we talking International Women's Month. Let me tell you why. We had a great conversation yesterday. I didn't get to half of the questions that I had on the table for that conversation, but that's okay. We're not going to really revisit them today. Today, I have a guest in studio, and my guest is Alicia Wallace from Equality Bahamas. Alicia is also a columnist in the Tribune, and her article today touches on the subject that I raised on air yesterday about women's participation in politics. And I wanted to take the time while I had her in studio to talk about it. Now, I invited Ms. Wallace here to speak about her organization's work for International Women's Day. But since I got her here, I want to take a few moments to interrogate this article. So if you haven't taken a look at it yet, it's in today's Tribune. Let me introduce Ms. Wallace, and then could tell you the name of the column and a little bit about herself before we delve into it. Good morning, Ms. Wallace.
Good morning. How are you?
I am good, thank you. So I know you as the founder of Equality Bahamas.
Yes.
Tell us about Equality Bahamas and some of the other organizations you founded.
Equality Bahamas started in 2014. It actually started as a coalition.
Okay.
Rapid response to the comments by then MP for Tall Pines when he made the non-joke about domestic violence. So a group of us came together and formed a coalition, and that coalition has since become Equality Bahamas, which I run with a team of amazing volunteers, about 7 young women who keep it going. One of our main programs is Women's Wednesdays, which takes place monthly, usually the first Wednesday of the month, just creating a space for people to come and talk about issues of personal concern, issues of national, regional, and international importance, but with a particular gender lens focused on women and mostly marginalized women, people who are particularly vulnerable. I also founded the same year, 2014, Hollaback Bahamas, which is part of a global movement to end street harassment. So the main Hollaback is based in New York City, but at the time that we started, I think there were about 80 sites in cities all over the world.
That's awesome. So when I met Alicia Wallace, it was around the time of the formation of Equality Bahamas, at least the beginning of the response to, I think that's Leslie Miller's comments in the House. And his comments in the House, right? What Miller said, he tried to use an example of a past experience of a relationship with a partner, right? And he admits that he was abusive in that relationship. It was a form of communication almost. And when he realized that this behavior was inappropriate and problematic, like he said to her, there was an exchange, and it was sort of like, so you want me to hit you, and she was sort of like, yeah. I think that was sort of the vibe, right? And so he uses that to make this point that Bahamians love punishment.
Right. He was talking about, I think, fishermen.
Yeah.
And the way that they were being treated by the government. At the time, it was the FNM administration.
Yeah. And so I could say Mr. Miller was attempting to do something good, but I think didn't or doesn't understand the dynamics involved in what he was talking in, and didn't understand how insensitive those comments were, didn't understand the impact those comments would have on women, on the wider society, and how those comments may, even though he was admonishing his past behavior, may encourage other people to engage in the same behavior or to continue to engage in the same behavior, right? And I find that just like the critique of the Prime Minister yesterday, that in many instances, these inappropriate comments are not intentional, right? Like, well, I didn't mean to go out there and encourage men to hit women, or I didn't intend it as a sexually explicit joke, but politicians have to take the time to realize the impact of their words and actions on the wider community. One of the things I am grateful for having met Alicia in the advocacy space is, first of all, her willingness to do the work, right? When we actually engage, we had a meeting, we were at a restaurant, and I called the waitress sweet girl because she's young. And I thought, ma'am, at the time, she's very young, is inappropriate. And I had this habit of calling women sweet girl. And I felt like, hey, I'm a safe person. I ain't coming on to nobody, especially nobody on their job and no young women. It's okay for me to say that. And Alicia showed me straight away, Miss Greene, you cannot be using that type of language. It is inappropriate. And even if you're a safe woman and you ain't into flirting with or being sexually aggressive with women and people generally, it's a no-no. I really stopped in that moment and reflected on what she was saying and the impact of my action, and I went cold turkey on something that I had been doing for a couple of years, right? Like I went straight cold turkey. I tell that story to share a couple things. The first is that we have to be constantly prepared for critique and constantly prepared for introspection and to look at ourselves and our own behavior and determine whether it's good, whether it's straight, whether it's positive, whether it's positively impacting other people, or whether it is helping to create a less safe environment for other people, right? Another reason I want to share this story is because yesterday a number of callers talked about women being women's greatest barrier, right? In political life, in leadership, and in the world generally. And we talked about instances where women do behave in ways, like they're creating barriers or they're trying to stop women's advancement. We highlighted some of those. But I want to emphasize something that I discussed in the show. Let's switch that. Let's flip that on its head, and let's talk about and start saying that women are women's greatest resource.
Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
And so when Alicia gave me that sound and solid critique, I didn't take it as, look at this young advocate coming here trying to tell me what to do and what is right or what is wrong. First of all, I was grateful to share space with another advocate that was thinking that critically and didn't have an issue with engaging older advocates about behavior that they thought was problematic, right? Because that's what we're supposed to be doing. And if I had seen her as a barrier, I would have missed out on all the great work that she's doing, the opportunity to collaborate, the support that she gave me through the gender equality referendum, and helping to grow what is becoming a vibrant young women's rights movement in the Bahamas. And so I just wanted to touch on those things, because we had a heavy conversation yesterday. And as a women's rights advocate, I have a responsibility to ensure that we frame these conversations, not necessarily properly, but in helpful ways, right? And we always accentuate the positive. But back to Alicia. So Alicia, the theme for International Women's Day set by UN Women is Women in Leadership, Achieving an Equal Future in a COVID-19 World. The theme is meant to align with that of the upcoming 65th session of the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women, right? And that theme is women's full and effective participation and decision-making in public life, as well as the elimination of violence for achieving gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls. Those are sort of heavy themes, very wordy, but when you get into them, they sort of break down very easily. So I want to ask you your thoughts on the theme, and what parts of the themes are important for us to focus on in the Bahamas.
These are both important themes. They're a little bit different, but connected. UN Women came up with this theme of women in leadership because of the CSW theme and tying them in because they're taking place in the same month. And we've seen over the last year now with the COVID-19 pandemic, lots of conversation about the difference in performance, resilience, recovery across countries and between countries that have women in positions of leadership, not only heading countries as prime ministers and presidents, but also as the head of recovery efforts, whether that's through physical health, medical health, mental health, economic recovery, and realizing that there are particular competencies that women have due to our lived experiences and our sort of training to think about everything in terms of community and in terms of who is there and who needs help and what can we do to help other people. So it's really a timely theme. It's something that's important to tie into COVID-19 and thinking about the competencies and the kinds of people that we need to be in decision-making positions in order for us to be able to handle difficult times and be able to, as everyone is talking about, build back better.
Absolutely, absolutely. So let's sort of get into the meat and let's get into this article that you wrote. I'm going to read one of the paragraphs, and then let's talk about it a little bit, right?
Okay.
Political parties, and I'm quoting from Alicia Wallace's column in today's Tribune. Political parties continue to announce the ratification of candidates and are far from gender parity. Not even 30% of the slates are women. This is no surprise, right? Considering the fact that the two major parties had 4 and 6 women on their slates of candidates. We currently have 5 women in parliament, 12.8%. It stands to reason that if both political parties had more women as candidates, women would comprise a higher proportion of parliament, and we may have actually had the representation. It is important that even as we advocate for a political quota, we emphasize the need for quality candidates. Political quotas, right?
Yeah.
I got a short note here about them from this organization called IDEA, right? IDEA is the international, I wrote this down and I lost it, but it's an international democracy and elections assessment organization. And they do a lot of work on quotas, right? And they say an increasing number of countries are currently introducing various types of gender quotas for public elections. In fact, half of the countries of the world today use some type of electoral quota for their parliament. Could you give us an example of a quote?
Yeah, so we've been having this conversation within the Caribbean region for a long time. Not many countries have made the move. Guyana is currently the only country that actually has a political quota in place and has had for some time, I think from 2001. They've
Right.
had a political quota where the way it works is that you're not saying that, 1/3 of parliament is going to be women and you sort of handpick. That's not the way it works. All political parties that are contending have to ensure that 1/3 of their slates are women. And if you want to win, some of these women are going to have to be in winnable seats. But the idea of the quota, it's a temporary special measure. It's not something that's meant to last forever.
Right.
It's supposed to change culture and the way that we think about leadership in this instance.
Right.
But the idea is that political parties will put women in winnable seats. And if you have 1/3 of all of these political parties, their slates being women, you have a pretty decent chance of having that many women in parliament. So in Guyana, where they've had this quota for a while, they've consistently been around 30%
Yeah,
overall.
right.
It's worked
Yeah.
quite well there. Of course, 30% is a pretty low bar at this point because women are more than half the population. So we
Right.
should really be going for 50%.
Right. A minimum.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And I asked the question yesterday, is it that we think that we don't have enough qualified women to vie for frontline politics?
It's an interesting question, and it's an annoying question. I think a lot of people will say, well, women aren't putting themselves forward and all these kinds of things. And we have to break that down, thinking about gender ideology and the things that we've learned about who gets to be a leader, who serves best as a leader, and the way that we think about the so-called traits of women and the so-called traits of men, and this idea that, women are emotional and men are rational, when really all of us are emotional. It's just that we get to express different kinds of emotions, different ranges of emotion, and we don't necessarily see certain things like anger as an emotion, right? We see that as a strength. So there's a lot to interrogate there, but also we tend to hold women to a higher standard when it comes to things like this, when we're talking about equality. So for women have to earn equality.
Yeah.
Men are already at a particular position.
It's like
because
they're
they
the
just
default.
get to be there.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're the default, but
Yeah.
we have to go above and beyond to prove ourselves. And I can't remember who it was, but somebody was talking about political quotas and the idea that, what about if you just put any woman in that position, what's going to happen? But men are allowed to be mediocre all the time in politics.
Yeah.
And I don't want mediocre women in politics, as I talk about in my
Right.
article, right? But let's talk about equality. Let's
Yeah.
talk about making space and creating environments where women are trained and equipped to lead.
Right. And so if political parties are going to essentially force, right, any candidate on a constituency because they feel that the party brand is strong enough to carry any candidate
Yes.
through the House of Assembly,
Yeah.
right? Then why not just put a woman there?
Right. And we see that all the time, where
Right.
they could just run anybody because they know that they're going to get this
Right.
constituency. And we saw the shift in that in the last election, right? Like
Right.
there were like no winnable seats, basically.
Right, except for my constituency. And let me just make this point here, right? So I live in St. Anne's, and my FNM candidate is Adrian White. I grew up in the same neighborhood with Adrian White. And at the time, the girls and the boys didn't necessarily play together in the same way, so not as close as sort of the male neighbors, right? But I know this boy. And I think he's a solid boy. I still haven't interrogated his politics yet. But I even feel a way and want to say to the FNM, look here, this is my brethren, I mean, I grew up with your boy, long time, But maybe put a woman in the safe seat.
Yeah.
Maybe.
So sure of it.
Right.
Let's put a woman, especially if the leader of your party is talking about how they want to see a woman prime minister.
Yeah.
Are you creating an environment for that?
Right. And here's another thing. Run them. Like if you have if the seat is not safe for you and you know you're going to lose the seat, right? I'm talking about St. Anne's and all of the other political parties that refuse to introduce substantive candidates to St. Anne's because they think it's an FNM safe seat. If you have a seat that you know it's safe, you're going to lose it, put women in those spots so they can get the experience. Support them, knowing that the chances are they won't win, but support them fully, right? And maybe not financially to win the seat, but support them in implementing programs in the community and let them get a sense of leadership at that community level for a political party, right?
Yeah, I agree with part of that. I don't want to see women run to lose.
I
to
got
get
you.
the experience, because we're not putting men through that process.
Oh yeah, they do it. Oh no, they do it, and the men won't talk about it, right?
I mean, you're talking about men individually, but I'm talking about them as a class, as a group of people, right?
And
It's not happening in that way.
Okay.
And if we want to prepare women for leadership, sure, let's do that. Let's do that within political parties. So we saw when the PLP, I think when they ratified their first set of candidates, they talked about having this training program where, all of their, what did they call them? Their aspirants
Yes.
participated in this training where they learned the history of the political party and all these kinds of things, right?
And hold on, I read the quote. It's the history of the Bahamas, parliamentary procedure, and the history of the party, among other things.
Yes, we don't know what the other things are.
Yeah. However, let me also stick a note. So a guest of mine, Chris Davis, was a part of that training program. And I think he focused on the history of the Bahamas. And I know my brethren
As
tried
Chris would do.
right, throw some revolutionary theory and thought and opportunity for thought in there. So because people are going to accuse me of beating up political parties in the next few months, and I want them to know I see them, and I see the good things they trying to do, and they do it.
Yeah. So we need to see more gender sensitivity training.
Yeah,
You know, are they talking about sexual harassment?
right.
Are they talking about what it means to be an MP?
Mm-hmm.
Now, org has a series right now where they're talking about MPs.
Yes.
What does it mean to be an MP? What do you expect from MPs? Are our expectations realistic?
Mm-hmm.
Do we need to change the way we think about members of parliament? Do we need to change the way we think about representation versus leadership? And it's a really important conversation to have. But going back to your earlier point around training and preparing people for leadership, this should be a long-term process. If you know that you have people in their 20s and their 30s who are aspirants, right? Like they
Right.
want to run, they want to represent their constituencies. Why not pair them with people who are MPs? Have
Right.
them help to run these constituency offices that get closed within weeks of the election, right? You can't get into these offices. They're boarded up. Hurricane shutters up from the summer and you never see them come down. Why not have them help to run these constituencies and get
Right.
real experience for themselves and for the parties, but also connecting with people within the constituencies? Because one of the things that we're complaining about right now is that we've never heard of these candidates in our lives.
Right.
They're going to show up looking for our votes, and we're like, I never seen you. Do you even live around here?
Right. And so I see the number of new women on slates. I have no idea.
A small number.
Right.
Let's be
Very,
clear.
very tiny number. And so I'm trying to figure out how am I going to couch the conversation because I don't want to discourage them. Right. And I want to know that, like, I fundamentally support you as a woman, but I don't know who you is
Yeah.
and how important that is in our culture.
And how many opportunities do we get to find out who these people are?
Mm-hmm.
Because there are no debates, there aren't very many town halls, there aren't really opportunities to hear their positions on issues. And throughout the election process, we just sort of get sold on what political parties are interested in or what they're prepared to pretend they're interested in until they actually win.
Yeah. So look here, let's take a small break from the conversation. Let me read the text, catch up on what the texters are saying.
Yeah.
And then maybe, Kermit, we go to a break and then we get back into the conversation. So my first text, I want to say good morning to I imagine my number one fan, Ms. Greene. Morning, 2 straight. I love the FNM. 2, your guest said women are more naturally in tune with certain things. Could it be that men are more naturally suited for politics?
Read that again.
Your guest said women are more naturally in tune with certain things. Could it be that men are more naturally suited for politics?
Okay, so I'm going to pull out the word naturally there.
Yeah. Okay, so we're not going to a break. We're going to delve right into this text.
Yeah,
Let's go.
It's not natural. We're not born thinking in particular ways. We are taught to think and behave in particular ways. We train girls, we raise girls much differently than we raise boys, even if you look at what girls are allowed to do versus what boys are allowed to do. I mean, I remember growing up, I couldn't go to certain kinds of events, and looking at my brother a couple years later, going to the things I couldn't go to, doing the things that I couldn't do. And it's because we are socialized in particular ways because of gender. That's what gender is, right? It's relations between people.
Yeah.
Women and men, and the ideas that we have that we impress upon them about how they have to be.
Right. So a man may learn about leadership in a work environment where he is responsible for multiple people and multiple sets of operations, right? He may learn some human resources skills, how to identify skills in people. He may learn some resource management skills, like how to help people be comfortable in the work environment and doing the work, right? He may learn the economics of managing people, all of that. And we say, okay, that man got leadership skills. These are things that he may have learned in his most dominant environment. But a woman or a young girl who has to manage her schoolwork and school life, because let's not act like young teenagers don't have emotional and psychological issues, conflict and social
All kinds of things
issues,
going
right?
on at school.
Right, so they got to manage their school life and their school work And for many young women and men, right? I say young men as well, but for many young women, they got to come home and manage their home life and their siblings. They may have to fill the gap for their parents, ensure that everyone is safe, is fed, right? Is focused on their schoolwork, gets time to play but not get into trouble, right? Then they get to figure out to do their own schoolwork, to deal with their own debriefing and emotional processing. And so young women often grow up learning these same skills, but we don't ever really say, well, look, she's a leader. She's managing multiple people in multiple environments, right?
And it doesn't change. We see women running households, and we talk about the second shift. During COVID-19, women worked the first shift and the second shift at the same time. It used to be that women went out to work and they came home and then they worked the second shift, dealing with domestic tasks, doing the laundry, cooking, making sure children did their homework. You know, women and men both out, typically 9 to 5, whatever those hours are. But for some reason, women are tasked with that at-home work.
Yeah.
Right? This work that is considered to have a lesser value, but work that actually allows other people to be able to do what they have to do and to contribute to the economy. Women's work underwrites the economy.
Yeah.
And this goes back to that thing of, are men or women better suited for politics? It's that politics has been built for men.
The political culture suits men.
Yes.
Right? You're having all your meetings at night. You know where the wife is. You know where the women are, what they're doing. They're trying to prepare their families for the next day, and they're trying to prepare themselves for the next day. Let me stick a pin there, though. I personally know plenty men who pull that second shift, who is not a tribute, it's not an honor for their wife. This is what I, as a man, am supposed to do. It's just a natural function. So we got plenty of them here. But if we took a look at the recent survey, by recent, about 4 years ago, that COB students did with 10th and 12th graders, we can see that the prevalent ideas in these young people's heads are these fundamental traditional norms.
Very
like
patriarchal,
right.
misogynistic ideas about the relationships that exist between men and women.
Absolutely.
The cis hetero
Right.
relationships.
I would call it heteronormative, right?
Yes.
But they believe the man in charge of the relationship, and he tell you what you could do, right? And if you offend him, it's a problem. And so even though we see examples of, I think some men who have matured into this sensibility, right? And some men who grew up in it, right? Because I know men who that's the existence. Young people, though, are still entrenched or still being allowed to think that behavior is acceptable.
Yeah.
Okay, so look here. We still got to talk about Equality Bahamas' theme for today. And I got a caller on the clock. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to go to the caller. I'm going to read the rest of these texts. We're going to go to a break, and then we're going to start talking about Equality Bahamas' theme. Caller, you're on the clock.
Could I change the narrative for something that I find very disturbing?
Is it about women? Does it impact women? Does it affect women?
It does to an extent.
Okay.
I've just learned that a 24-year-old can have unlawful sexual relationship with a 14-year-old, and that the police cannot do nothing about it.
That's not true.
And I am wondering, and because I tried to tell the person, I saw on the news last night where a bus driver, I think, was fined $200 for a similar thing. But a mother advised me that they went to the police on a similar matter, and that the police told them that they cannot get involved.
It's a 16-year-old?
14 years.
40. Oh, no, that is incorrect. I'm not even a lawyer, and I could tell you that is incorrect. And so I'm going to tell you to advise the mother to either call the crisis center or call the Eugene DePuch Law School Legal Aid Clinic, right? And either one of those sort of agencies can give her sound professional advice on the best way forward. The age of consent in this country is 16. That's what it is. we often allow, we often do not criminalize or prosecute young people if like they're 14 and 15, or if they're 15 and
Right.
15, or 15 and 16. The court ensures that they have access to counseling and therapy and sessions, I think, that also include their parents. But you are absolutely right. That is a concerning issue and something that we absolutely need to look into. See, because we're talking about women.
Yes,
Humans. Oh, sorry. Let me let you finish off.
No.
Yeah.
Well, basically, I just wanted, because what I'm saying, when after I got that information and I saw the thing on TV, I just thought maybe this thing is more widespread than people would say. But a 24-year-old having sexual relations with a 14-year-old,
Yeah. Any degree of intimacy is inappropriate and absolutely inappropriate. And even though a 14-year-old is a sexual being coming into her own sexuality, it is against the law for anybody who is over the age of 14 to engage in sexual intimacy with her, let alone over the age of 16, let alone 10 years. Now, the law doesn't make a distinction between 16 and 24, right?
yes, ma'am.
But society should make a distinction. But you're absolutely right. Rape culture, I started off broadly. This sort of refusal to acknowledge the severity of these instances of sexual abuse and sexual harassment, right, suggests that we have a culture that tolerates rape. And we call that rape culture.
And my thing, Madam Host, was I am wondering if the parents keep quiet, how many other persons this predator, this 24-year-old predator, have not preyed upon.
Let me just say to you, your concerns are just, and I would imagine hundreds and hundreds of girls, not that one predator, not that one, but we know, because we don't talk the stories, but we know that young women have been subjected to rape. That's what it is, rape. Either they don't give consent, or they don't have the capacity to give consent to the nature of the relationship. See, it's not just the act itself, it's the nature of the relationship as well, right? And so it is prevalent. I will tell you that I was made aware of an instance where a mother was formally prostituting her daughter to the sanitation workers and other workmen in the immediate area they lived in. It is happening. And it's one of the reasons why I will remind us of my commentary yesterday and encourage all political leaders to think critically before they engage these issues. Because constantly, they seem to be attempting to engage the issue in a positive way, but they're so ignorant to the issues, the theories, the lived experiences of the people around them, that they are always floundering and making mistakes. In our discussion today, I wanted to raise the question of quality versus quantity in terms of women candidates, and look at Lanisha Roll and Frankie Campbell, both as ministers of social services, that both, I think, have made major missteps and made horrible public statements about their work due to a lack of emotional intelligence, critical engagement, and a severe ignorance of the work, the actual job description, right? And so, thank you, caller. I gotta go. I got another caller on the line. Caller, you on the clock. Hi, sorry, caller. Oh, let's see. Kermit, they still there?
Yes, good morning, Miss Greene.
Morning, how you doing?
Yeah, how you doing? I was reluctant to call, right? But, I'll make a disclosure, and just to let you know that this is too prevalent, right? I have two daughters. One is 21, goes to UB, and another 5-year-old, so I'm still in trouble, right? Mm-hmm. And so he has what's going on now in the inner city, right? So this is something that disturbed me. A friend of mine, a young gentleman, about 28, he said we do some work sometimes. a female friend of his was by two of them was by a gentleman, right? Mm-hmm. And so what happened is one left some items there, and she went to retrieve them, and so the gentleman didn't want to let her outside, or locked inside the door. She had called her mom and called him, and so as they went into the area, I wouldn't say what area, they actually they didn't know where it was. They actually heard her screaming. She had a knife in her hand because the gentleman was keeping her at that particular time beyond his will. So what I'm saying is, we need a real anti-rape campaign, which is, rape is barbarous at best, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that, to me, like born in the 60s, sex is reciprocal. I can't enjoy it unless it's mutual. You understand what I'm saying?
That's right.
So I just don't get it. So this type of ideas amongst the young men seems to be prevalent, where I saw a gentleman last Jungle before the pandemic actually beating his girl about less than about 80 meters from where the police were standing. And then they didn't look, and then they responded subsequently. So these are the type of ideas that men are breeding. I have two daughters. I don't want to get in any trouble, because if I want to do something, the best thing for me to do is be quiet. Have a good day.
That's right. But what we could do is, we are going to practice emotional intelligence, right? And instead of acting out in rage and anger, we're going to focus our emotions, right, on creating resolutions, determining what the problem is and how we can fix it. And that's why, the conversation is focused on women in public life, because I think, and women's involvement in politics, because we need a top-down approach and a ground-up approach at the same time, to shift this culture. Now, thank you guys for engaging this part of the subject. I'm going to read the last of these texts, and then we're going to move on to the second part of the discussion quickly. But we're going to continue this discussion because it's obviously important. And I want you all to note that it's so important that two men call in, because women's issues are men's issues too, right? To raise their concern. So let me get to these texts. Erin, women shy away from politics because of the nastiness involved. The F&M was always on the cutting edge when it came to women. Erin, why would women want to go into politics? You see how the PLP do one of their own? Ms. Pinling, shame on them, just shameful. Next text, so many important real things that deserve to be spoken about, and we can't get off of this. That's crazy. Still like your show though, Erin. I hope that after you listen because you sent that text at 10:25. So I hope you listen in for the last 15 minutes, you will realize how important it is to talk about this stuff, right? And to talk about it in different ways. Maybe it's that we've always been talking about it in the same way. And if we talk about it differently and look at it from a different perspective, maybe we can start to shift the culture that we're talking about.
Yeah, I wish we didn't have to talk about it. We do, because we're sitting here with 13% women in parliament, and people are calling in about issues of rape and statutory rape that we ignore. And we've been talking about it for the past few months, right? With these instances of girls going missing, and the general response of the public being, well, she can be back after the weekend. She by man.
Yeah.
Right? Well, if she is by man, that's a problem.
Yeah.
Because she is not of the age of consent.
Right. And if she is constantly leaving her house, we also need to interrogate whether she's experiencing domestic violence in that home. A lot of young women leave their homes and run to unsafe territory because they are victims of incest in their own homes.
Yeah.
And they run to men because when they run to the people in their family, they are shamed and forced back into silence. And I'm not going to call any names. We had an issue of that arising where a woman boldly and bravely came out and told her story after years of hiding it, right? Mm-hmm. And that's why we talk about it.
We don't know enough about what is happening with these girls. We don't know enough about what's happening after the situation. We know that the commissioner of police at some point said something like most of the cases required nothing further. And, that raises so many questions.
Right.
How could it result in no further action being required?
Here's the thing. We're not concerned about protecting the girl from prosecution because there's nothing for her to be prosecuted for, right? Why aren't these men being prosecuted for statutory rape, for child endangerment, for kidnapping or holding young people hostage, right? We don't need to interrogate the life of the child. That's not what we're talking about, making her life public. But if an offense was committed, then what is the resulting charge?
Yeah.
Okay, so Lisa, let's go to a break. Kermit, can we go to a break? And when we come back, we're going to get into Equality Bahamas' theme for International Women's Day. I think you guys are going to love it.
When you get your child immunized, you are protecting him or her from diseases and also creating a safer community. It took many years for the Bahamas to get rid of infections such as polio, mumps, and measles. Keeping up with your child's immunization schedule so that they are fully protected can keep these diseases from coming back. The COVID-19 pandemic should not stop your child from getting immunized. Even if your child missed an appointment, they should continue with follow-up visits to catch up with their immunizations. Contact your nearest clinic or healthcare provider for more information or to make an appointment. Remember, immunizations are free at all government healthcare facilities. Prevent disease. Immunize, please.
This message has been brought to you by the Ministry of Health.
Meet Jackie. Jackie's a hard worker with steady income, but she has a personal loan and multiple credit cards to pay off. To keep her account current, Jackie opted for a loan from Fidelity Bank to consolidate her debt into one monthly payment and earn interest on a built-in savings account. Be like Jackie. Call 356-7764 to book a complimentary financial coaching session. Fidelity also offers virtual assistance. Fidelity, we're good for you.
Good morning and welcome back to On the Clock with Erin Greene. And we've got Alicia Wallace in studio with us today. We're about to talk about the theme for IWD, but let me just share these contact numbers. The contact number for the Bahamas Crisis Center is 328-0922. That's 328-0922. And a telephone contact for the Eugene DePuch Law School Legal Aid Clinic is 322-5943. That's 322-5943. Please reach out to either organization if you are having conflict and you need to figure out how to resolve it. I got a text here quickly, Alicia. It says, rape culture doesn't exist, and what is the issue with 13% if that's who won and they are the best candidates? Well, like we said earlier, any old man could run, right, with a party if the party thinks the brand is stronger than the candidate. So why not put a woman there? Why we can't have more if that's the way we doing it? If we running it like a corner shop, then why we can't have more women, just to say. But we also interrogated the need for quality candidates of any gender that will focus on the issues at hand, right? That's also important. I had an example about that, but I want to hear about International Women's Day's events for, Equality Bahamas' events for International Women's Day and the month of March.
So we are taking people to Planet Pleasure. Our theme is pleasure. We're really excited about it. A different way of looking at International Women's Day, because usually it's very advocacy, activism centered. But we realize that people, women in particular, are tired.
Yeah.
We've been working, in general, but also following COVID-19 pandemic and the way that it's changed all of our lives. We really wanted to focus on pleasure and connect that to three major issues. And I'll talk about that a little bit more, but we're kicking off tonight at Women's Wednesdays. We always have it the first Wednesday of the month. And this month we are in conversation with Carla Moore from Jamaica. She is an activist, academic, alchemist, and now she is a certified life coach. And she has been with us a number of times over the years. We usually have her a couple of times a year because people really, really enjoy conversations with her. She's super cool, really down to earth. And this evening, we are going to be talking about pleasure. She's going to sort of have us looking back at what we used to enjoy that we maybe don't make time for anymore. Somebody made us feel like it was inappropriate or we shouldn't get to enjoy that.
Or wasteful.
or wasteful. Yeah. And looking inward at the things that we would like to be doing.
Okay, so stick a pin right there. Because when many people hear pleasure, they think about one of two things. They either think about sex and sexual intimacy, or they think about intoxication and getting high or getting lit, right?
Yeah.
But pleasure is far more than that.
Definitely. Way, way more than that. Those are, sexual pleasure is very important. We don't talk about it enough in depth. I mean, we kind of talk about it in this sort of joking kind of way.
Right, and we talk about it in commercialized ways, right?
Yeah, exactly. But actually, one of the main themes that we're connecting it to is marital rape. Because in the conversations that we've been having about marital rape, there's been a lot of focus on consent, which is important, but consent is like a contested thing within the context of marriage, because some people feel like, well, once you get married, you gave consent perpetually, for the rest of your life. So it's still important to interrogate that, but we also want to bring pleasure into that conversation. Even if you believe that about consent, do women have the right to pleasure?
Yeah.
And to sexual pleasure in particular. So, the theme is something that's sort of spanning different issues. Another thing that we've connected it to is women's unpaid labor. And we talked about this a little bit earlier, even talking about girls who are going to school and coming home and they're responsible for their siblings. They have to do their own homework. They have to make sure that their siblings do their homework, make sure everybody eats, everybody is safe. And we carry that throughout our whole lives, right? Women are the ones who are taking care of their spouses, elderly parents, making sure that they remember everybody's birthdays, making plans for all the different events, figuring out how to make masks for all the children. Doing all of this unpaid labor on the top of paid labor, which is usually underpaid because of the gender wage gap, leaves little space for leisure, which means there's very little room for pleasure. So we really want to make space for intentional consideration of what pleasure is, what it can look like, and how we can have more of it in our lives, even if it's just peppered, throughout the day in little bits.
Yeah.
Pleasure for you might be, a lot of people go and park by the beach, right? To sit down and eat lunch. So where are the places that we can find pleasure and actually recognize that this isn't just me shoving food down my throat.
Right.
It's also me taking a moment and recognizing that, this is enjoyable. I do like this.
Right. So even though I may have to rush to get to Montague Beach with my lunch to eat it.
It's worth that 25 minutes or whatever it is.
Of bliss.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I guess we're going to ask some questions like, how can we support or help other people to access and experience pleasure, which I think is an important question. And something I want to ask my listening audience to think about. How do we police women's enjoyment, right? Or accessing pleasure? And how do we police men's pleasure, right? Yeah. And so as we close out, I will tell you all this quick story. At the market I go to on the weekend where we sell all the vegetables, right? We had a wonderful moment. So I told you all a story earlier in the show about how we had a DJ started playing the new song Jerusalem. And there was a dancer out there, and she's a dancer and a dance teacher. And she started doing the dance moves, and everybody started joining in. Now, she promised to come back so she could teach more people the exact dance moves. Bahamians, we'll dance it whether we know it or not. And so this Saturday, she came back to the market. The DJ saw her and started playing the song all right away. And then we joined her to learn the dance moves. 2 of us joined her, and then there were 4 of us, right? And the vendors and the crowd are watching and enjoying it. And then a young girl, maybe 15, 16, joined us. Her father was on the side, and he was encouraging her and shouting, cheering her on. And then he got so overwhelmed with excitement, he joined in the dance, right? And then there's an older gentleman who came to catch a seat, catch his breath, catch a seat. He was clapping and loving it. And I thought to myself, what a wonderful moment, right? The vendors have been out there for like 5 hours, 6 hours at that point, is tired. The instructor enjoyed teaching and participating with students learning to dance. The people dancing enjoyed the pleasure of that physical freedom and the music. The vendors enjoyed watching other people enjoy themselves. They may have been reflecting on the last time they went dancing, when they can go dancing again. And that father who was watching his daughter dance and couldn't help it but to join in with her, right? All of us were experiencing pleasure collectively and individually in those moments. And guess what? It was free, right? And all it took was a willingness to be involved and a willingness to share that space, right?
That's the kind of environment that we create every year with our March and Expo, usually the Saturday closest to International Women's Day. But of course, this year, given the situation with the pandemic, we've decided to go virtual. So the Expo is still taking place. It will be on Zoom. You can register at tiny.cc/IWD-pleasure.
Repeat that.
tiny.cc/IWD-pleasure. And the expo is running on Saturday, that's this Saturday, March 6th, from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m., with a range of events, including Pleasure Poetics, where we'll have a workshop with Brendan Tynes, who will take us through some exercises, whether you're a poet or not. There'll be contemporary movement, gardening, a session on repairing your clothes, a theater session with a theater teacher and actress, which should be a lot of fun. So a lot's going on, yoga throughout the day. Drop by. You don't have to come for the whole session, but you might find that you can't leave once you join. And if you're interested in Women's Wednesdays tonight, sign up at tiny.cc/WW-pleasure.
Thank you, Bahamas, for tuning into this conversation. It was difficult in moments. It was joyful in moments. But that's what happens when we share space together. And sometimes we have to trade off some of our own conversation to make it work. In the words of Audre Lorde, the sharing of joy, whether physical, emotional, psychic, or intellectual, forms a bridge between the sharers, which for understanding. Much of what is not shared between them and lessens the threat of their difference. Thank you, producer. Thank you for tuning in. Have a great day, Bahamas. Lee Van Miller is next with Unleashed.